Hello there. This is Rom Wills back at you with yet another video. And since this is being simulcast on my ladies channel, hello ladies, welcome to my spot. The major issue in relationships. I wanted to do this simulcast because I wanted to really get into what's really going on in relationships out here. And it could really come down to one word: compatibility, or rather incompatibility. Because that's the major thing when people are trying to find that right person, is they're basically just incompatible with the people they're meeting. But usually they're not only incompatible, but they have an unrealistic expectation that they're going to make it work out. And usually because of several reasons that I'm going to go into, they'll try to make it work out with somebody they should just kind of walk away from. Now, the reason I'm going to break down the incompatibility down to two basic things. Because when people have to be compatible, they have to be compatible on those two basic things. They have to be compatible on a carnal level, a sexual level, and then they have to be compatible on a social level. That's about the values. Now, let me go into some deep science. Now, I've done this before. I've actually done this before, probably on a paid video. And I'm not going to get into the terms I've used. People who follow me a long time might remember the videos. But all human beings have two sexual drives. Two sexual drives. Now, the one drive is what we all know, the carnal drive, the lust. When we want somebody based on pure lust. It has nothing to do with their social position in life, their religion, anything of that sort. Not even money. It's just pure lust. You want to get with them. You want to get with them. And it's, you want to have sex with them. It doesn't matter what their marital status is, whatever. You want them. Of course, people don't always get with the people they lust. But then there's this second drive. And that's more of a social thing. That's more of an emotional thing. That's more based on values, like having the same social class, being educated. Money actually falls into that. Having the same religion or close to the same spiritual values. Is basically, I would call it more about companionship. Now, you'll notice many people, when they're younger, they'll mate based more on that lust. But then if they stay together, it becomes more about companionship. That's why you might have some of the older couples that stayed together for many years. They got married as teenagers, maybe back, way back in the day, 30s, 40s, beyond that. They got married, but that was based on lust. But then as they grew older, they became fond of each other, but the relationship is based more on companionship, right? So, but here's the interesting thing. A lot of it, most of it really, is subconscious. People don't think about it that way. People don't sit down and think, whoa, well, not the way I'm going to think about it or look at it. Because people who follow me closely or people who follow me in my inner circle know I can get into the metaphysics. I don't really do it as much now. But I can get into like sacred sexuality, tantra, and other stuff. So, Kuma Sutra type of stuff. But I don't. But one of the things to understand is on a subconscious level, people always going to emphasize one or the other. Now, like the carnal. And you can even tell, you can just look at them and tell, like the carnal. People who emphasize the carnal, they're the type who's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get in the gym, make sure my body looks great, make sure my hygiene is up, make sure I look great to the opposite sex. Those are the types who are going to wear clothing that emphasize their bodies. Like the women, they're going to wear those tight jeans. They're going to wear those tight jeans, those low-cut tops. The men, they're going to wear something that shows their muscles. Some men will, like the men who might have a YouTube avatar or something showing their upper body. Boom. They are more on the carnal side. They pushing the carnal side of the equation. But then, and that's how, and they also more extroverted in how they approach getting sex. These are people, they're going to go to the parties, they're going to go out, they're not going to stay in the house. Now, the social side, that's where people are going to try to mate based on some value. Money is more on the social side. Money is more on the social side. Even though some people, some women especially, some women and men who emphasize the carnal, they figured out, hey, I can get some money for this body. But, the social side, they'll say, well, we should mate because of my credit score. We should mate because we have the same values. We have the same thing. Like many women, people think is solely about, many men think it's solely about money, but a woman is just as likely to mate with somebody because of his status, his job. That's more of a social thing. They go to the same church, they worship God the same way, or goddess the same way. And yeah, it's that deep. And it's more intellectual. It's more intellectual. Now, here's the interesting thing. People who emphasize the carnal tend to have a tendency to suppress that more intellectual side. If they lust you, they don't really care what your religion is or how much money you make. But if you're more intellectual, you actually suppressing your carnal side. Like the more intellectual type of people, and I should call it that, the more intellectual side. Just understand it. It's more in the head. Okay, that's the way I understand it. The carnal side is more in the body. The intellectual side is more in the head. And the intellectual side, they're going to say, well, we should mate. It's like they're going to try to use a rational way of we should mate. It's like, oh, I have a good job, or I'm such a good person. And those are important. Now, one of the things, not so much the carnal side. The carnal side are like whatever. They don't really look down on the intellectual side. They really don't. They can, but they don't. The intellectual side might look at the carnal side because they looking at them through the lens of, well, they don't have a degree. They don't have this much money, or they don't practice this religion. So they'll say, oh, why they so carnal? Why they so much into their body, or like being like that? But the thing is, neither side, you can't really go through without either one. And to the greatest degree that you suppress one, you'll have the hardest time. Because we all see those relationships. And that's really what it is. That's really what it is. Like if you have somebody more intellectual, or well, let me put it another way. Say you have some people and they emphasize more the carnal side of the relationship. Okay, yeah, the good is hot, is good for 6 months, but it's like a bull in the china shop. They're not going to have any direction, no value. It's like, okay, yeah, y'all can fuck. Okay, what y'all going to do outside of it? Your light's about to get turned off. Money is blown through because you don't have any discipline. You don't have any value. In fact, a lot of times couples like that, they end up breaking up because after the carnal side burns out, like after maybe 6 months, no matter how many orgasms you have, boom, you can't really do, you're not going any place. And usually in that type of couple, they'll break up, maybe get together every now and then. They'll find other mates and may cheat on them or something. But then you got the other side, the intellectual side. Now, in many ways, they make good couples, but they also make sexless marriages because there's no carnal drive there. There's no passion there. You're not looking at each other with lust. I mean, you can still have sex, but it's always going to miss that extra oomph. And one of the things, that's something that has to be really talked about. That's something that has to be developed. Now, I said that people emphasize one or the other. Very few people in the middle. Some people like to think they are. Usually intellectual types like to think they're in the middle. But usually with intellectual types, they've never felt that full carnal lust thing. They never lived in that world. So usually the only way they get there, if they're one, because they grew up emphasizing more of the intellectual side, they never felt that raw passion, that raw get on the highway on a 10 speed to go get some sex type of passion. Or the type that will go make love out on the beach and don't care who's looking type of passion. Or that, coming off the chandelier, shaking and levitating type of passion. So the only way they usually get there or feel that is if there's some major trauma. There is some major trauma that just loosens them up. They just say, oh, the hell with it. And usually most people on the intellectual side never get there. Like they'll intellectualize sex and they might even study tantra or all this other sacred sexuality stuff, but they never get there. At the same time, the carnal folks, usually what happens with the carnal folks is this. They run into a lot of bullshit when they're younger because on that side, you're going to have a lot of negative experiences because you basically mating, you're not really looking at the person's character. You're looking at their fat booty or, their eggplant or something like that. So usually with them, they usually grow. They'll stay that way, but then they'll start becoming more intellectual, interestingly enough, as they get older. Those are types who might be in their 40s or 50s. All of a sudden, they find some type of religion. And even then, it's still tough because that energy doesn't go away. Because that energy is the energy of life. That's how we all got here. That's how we all got there. So with the carnal folks, going through life is more of an issue of letting it just flow and losing control over it, which is a problem. It probably wouldn't be good to marry somebody who emphasizes carnal too much. But at the same time, the intellectual type, they stifling their energy. Now, if someone can get to that balance point, that's when they can take it to another level. That point where they perfectly balance between carnal and intellectual. And just to be clear, very few people are totally carnal. Very few people are totally intellectual. Most people are in a moderate range, which is with a lean towards one or the other. But if you can get to that 0 point where you have the carnal energy, but you can also focus it with your mind through values, please. There's nothing in life you can't accomplish because you have the drive, the energy to do it, but not but you have some control over it. Because it's interesting enough, a carnal person will always have that drive because if they have that drive to get sex, then they can transmute it into other things. People who follow me closely know I talk a lot about sexual transmutation. And that's a key. That's a key. They keep that carnal drive up, but then they focus. It's kind of like having a flamethrower. You got that fire, but you're directing it. It's not just wild. So that's the major issue, though. But see, here's the thing. Often somebody carnal will meet somebody intellectual, but they can't really get along. Or they're not attracted to them. The carnal person is not going to always be attracted to that person. They're not going to be attracted to the person because the person is not giving off any carnal energy. Now, they might deal with them, maybe to get some money out of them or, carnal folks still practice some type of religion and just to satisfy the surface world. But usually, a lot of people, the more carnal somebody is, the more likely they are to dip into the underworld. And interestingly enough, some intellectual types have dipped into the underworld too, but it's not on the same level. A lot of times because that carnal thing is still in them, but they trying to suppress it and they need a place for it to let go. And it's going to let go somewhere. So they need a place or permission to let it go. A lot of people in the BDSM communities and of that are surprisingly more intellectual than people realize, even though they're kind of in that underworld. So, and it's a lot of nuances to it. But getting back to the major issue, bringing it all back, those are the reasons why there is incompatibility. Because what's needed is balance. People need to balance the two. When they meet a mate, like every single person, if they really want to maximize the amount of mates they get, they do need to have some carnal appeal. They need to have that eroticism. They need to be able to turn their mate on. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. You need to be able to turn on your mate. It's like some people try to go in, well, that's evil and all of that, and that shouldn't be important. Well, don't complain if your mate if it's a man doesn't have any muscle, is out of shape, or they'll complain if the woman is out of shape and she ain't sexy. If you really think that, so you got to have some carnal appeal, but at the same time, you also have to have some direction. You have to have some value. You still got to live. Y'all can't spend all day in bed. Y'all can't spend all day in bed. So you still got to figure out how you going to get the bills paid. What value system? How you going to worship deity if you're going to worship deity? How the bills are going to get paid? And usually a lot of times beyond that, that's why a lot of couples, they don't have any direction. If you in a relationship, whether it's a relationship, whether it goes to marriage or just a committed relationship, it's a ship. It's a ship and it's traveling down a river. So somebody has to steer it. It has to have an agenda. It has to go someplace. And that's where the intellectual part comes in. So, until we really talk about the work, until we talk about compatibility, until we talk about that for a relationship to work, it needs to have some passion. Until we say, look, for a relationship to work, it has to have a value system. Things are just going to keep going, and that's a lot of the case. In fact, that's a big issue with the whole Pookie and Ray Ray thing. It's deeper. It's deeper. I can go full metaphysic on it, but just briefly, you have one side who are more intellectual, and then the other side that's more carnal. And like I say, the carnal side, they're more aggressive about fulfilling their sexual needs. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to go talk to women. They're going to go holler at them. They're going to dress in a way or adorn themselves in a way or have their bodies in such a way where the women find them attractive. They're going to interact with them on their level. And then the other side is going to get jealous. Because as a whole, hey, if you emphasize your carnal in this culture, you're going to get more play. You're going to get more people because you're more aggressive about it. And that's a big thing, because one thing about many people on the more intellectual side, since they're not emphasizing that more carnal aspect, and this could be the case if, like, just from a consensus view, they're physically attractive, but eroticism is a different energy. Shoot, they're going to be frustrated. They're going to wonder why this person who isn't disciplined, this person who doesn't seems to like values, is getting more gratification than they are. So that's the big thing. That's the big thing. But overall, for relationships to work, it has to have that at the base. It has to have a balance of carnal. It has to have a balance of values, more intellectual. That's the only way. There's no other way. Nobody can figure out a way out of it. And like I said, always get somebody there feel like they balance, and trust me, I can hit them with some questions and tell them that they're not. Because one thing I gotta say, sometimes people hear this and that they automatically assume, oh, I'm there, I'm on the top. It's like, come on, sit down and think about it. This is a diagnostic tool, and there's no look. If you're too carnal, if you're too much on the carnal side, that is a result of a few things. Your bloodline. Bloodline is very important. The environment you grow up in. That's very important. Like people who tend to be more carnal, they're going to have a tendency now to come from either very poor environments or very rich environments. Notice what I say. When I say poor environments, that's the hood. Because anybody who's grown up in those situations know is a lot of chaos. It's some chaos. And in that chaos, people are not putting brakes on their sexual energy. In fact, they figured out at a young age, hey, if they dress a certain way, look a certain way, it translates to power. Like I've always said, a very attractive carnal woman she could be born in an outhouse. She can be born in an outhouse, a house that has an outhouse, don't even have running water or something. And she can use her vagina to become, move up in social class, which is the real meaning of hypergamy. And now, it's not as much for the guys, but see, the guys usually, if they on that more carnal side, they usually have to, they have to bring a little bit of intellectualism to really move up. unless they get into the sex worker thing or entertainment game. So they have to still have it, but they still have that drive. And the reason why I say very rich, because if people understand the psychology of rich people, if people understand the psychology of rich people, they don't limit themselves. So if they want something, they gonna go for it. And so their sex drive, especially kids born in that sexual drive, they're usually not limited. They're expected to do some stuff, and they might be a little more balanced than someone poor, but anybody who's been around them, no, they off the chains. They are off the chains. Like, this is one of those times where I can name drop, but I'm like, no. So anyway, I didn't want this to be too long, but I wanted to put it out there for those people who are serious about either improving relationships in the community or just their own relationships. You got to deal with those two sides. If you finding that you're not holding a person's interest sexually, well, you need to deal with your carnal side. If you find that you are holding the people's interest sexually, but you seem to be stuck going in circles in the world of chaos, well, you need to deal with the intellectual side. And just to be clear, that's the real secret behind my book, Nice Guys and Players. The nice guys represent the intellectual side, the players represent the carnal side. Anybody who's read it said they'll know that my thing is you got to become balanced. That's always been my case. That's always been my thing. And for the women too. There's a lot of good women out there, but they're not sexy. They might be cute, pretty or something. And despite what some inexperienced people think, just being pretty doesn't translate to being erotically pretty. That's why if you doubt me, look at the difference. Look at a model and then look at a porn star. There's a big difference. And that's the same thing with the men. Like, you get these guys out here saying, oh, well, yeah, it looks, money, and status. Honestly, if the look isn't erotic, and the key to the erotic look is just some raw masculinity, then you want that more intellectual side. In fact, that's the biggest problem now with a lot of men looking for advice. They're trying to come at it intellectually, when really two things they could do: hit the gym and maybe take some martial arts, do something to get in touch with their raw masculinity. So anyway, like I said, this is longer than it usually is, and y'all know, usually I'm doing the Uncle Rom thing and not the Professor Rom Wills thing. So I'm gonna stop it here, and I appreciate everybody. Everybody have peace and blessings.